people don't leave companies, they leave leaders. So really, really think about that. You have such an amazing responsibility on your people's health, wealth, success, happiness, that you need to take a hard look at what you're doing, how you're making your team feel. And if you're noticing turnover higher than standard in the business, if you're noticing your reps just frankly not happy at work, like you own some of that. You really need to look at it.
Welcome to the Two Sales Guys podcast with your hosts, Sean Whitley and Matthew Sopiers. What's commonly talked about are the tactics and methodologies for sales professionals. What is less commonly talked about is the stress and anxiety that comes with being a seller. Each day, sales reps are asked to take rejection after rejection, operate in a world of uncertainty and high pressure, and either fail to hit their number or get a higher quota the next year. We'll talk about how to cope with these pressures and what a winning sales mindset really looks like. Sales is often called a performance business, and we'll explore how stress can drive bad selling behaviors, and alternatively, we'll look to experts on how you can manage your mind and wellness first so that you're putting your best foot forward every day at work. We'll talk to professionals in the industry who share the same experiences and what organizations can do to create a healthy, winning sales culture.
Today, we're joined by a seasoned sales executive, a successful leader of high-performing teams, and a sales coach of people with big dreams and goals, David Weiss. David has a track record of always bringing back double-digit growth tied to multi-million-dollar goals and has recently taken over as the Regional Vice President of Sales at Seismic, a leading sales enablement platform. Additionally, he also co-hosts a podcast with his wife, PsychandSales, to discuss the topics of mental health in the sales profession. With that, David, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Sean, Matt, thanks for having me, guys. Excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Same Likewise. Here. I think what we like to always start off with asking our guests, because the stories can be quite interesting and we find parallels and we also find some different paths to get there. But how did you get into the sales profession in the first place?
Yeah, man, great question. So I graduated college with a degree in psychology and marketing. And I had done some, retail sales. Actually, like my first sales job, I actually built and sold computers when I was like 16 years old. So did like retail sales through college, always kind of liked it. And I was debating this whole, like, do I go to business school? Do I pursue my PhD? Or do I, just start working? And my parents at the time, who I was very blessed, they paid for a lot of my college, made the decision really, really easy for me. They said, David, congratulations, you're a man, you have a degree, you're cut off. So I said, okay, well, I guess I need to now go make some money. So I was debating the whole, marketing or sales profession, had experience in sales. So I said, what the hell, like, let's try that. And got my first sales gig, flew down to Fort Myers, Florida. Similar to Matt, I had a view like his, living on the beach in Fort Myers. It was awesome. In about, I'd say 2 months, realized I made a terrible decision. Decided to quit that job, even though I was living on the beach. It was a hard decision. Fly back, live in my fraternity house. And I was like, that needs to stop pretty fast because I'm now a real professional. And get a new job. So I found this publication called Selling Power Magazine. And it still exists today, and it lists the top 50 companies to sell for. So I went, and being an entrepreneurial salesperson I literally applied to all 50. And playing the laws of averages, I got 2 interviews. So of those 2 interviews, I selected one, and I joined that organization, and I was awarded a territory of the entire state of New York. I had to be, and oddly enough, their regional headquarters was in New Jersey. So I was living in upstate New York, having to travel down to New Jersey. It's about 400 miles every single day in the middle of winter. That job lasted me 3 months, because one of the things I learned is they didn't give me sales training, they gave me product training. So I failed because I really, and it was my own fault, I wasn't a student in the game. I didn't really understand a lot of things. So I failed at my second job in sales. I said, you know what, strike three, I'm going to do it right this last time. If I'm going to do it, I need to make sure I really, really start honing in on companies with really good sales training and make sales training my priority. So I then ended up re-interviewing, got the job with the second company, the two, and then that company was Aramark. And Aramark took me under their wing for 4 years. They have some of the best sales training in the world. They taught me how to be a professional seller. And I'd say that's where I fell in love with sales. That's where I became a student in the game. That's where I realized how important sales methodology, sales acumen, business acumen was. And I leaned in really, really heavy to those things. And it's allowed me to have a career I'm happy about so far from there. So I just said a lot. I'm going to shut up. Back to you guys.
I mean, what I was just going to say was, I think it's interesting. We find, at least what I've noticed, is some of the early on experiences you have in sales is what really creates a defined path of what you find to be the most interesting in the long term.
Yep.
Like, I mean, you're saying how training and all that became like such an emphasis for you. And now in anything I've read that you've posted about yourself, it's heavily emphasized on the coaching, heavily emphasized on the process. And then even furthermore, you're now leading a sales enablement platform. So it's again, just about like process and how to make things better and make people more efficient. So I think that's quite interesting how an early on experience can really define some future stuff for you.
Yeah, man. And I would say that's spot on. I'm the type of person, like, I don't like to learn the same lesson twice. I love failing. I just don't want to fail the same way twice. I'll fail close, but like, let me get better every time. Let me actually learn. And the big, like, solidifying learning is proper sales training, becoming a student in the game, really leaning into it as a craft and a skill that can be mastered, from an art that you'll never necessarily master. Like, there's skills and then there's like everything else. And to me, really, really leaning into that, like that's what's enabled so much of my success.
Oh, and we're here to talk a little bit about stress today. And I think sales methodologies, some sort of process or method for thinking about our profession on the daily or weekly or monthly or even annual basis, I think also alleviates stress in a way, because you have something to focus on and you're not so outcome driven. I mean, you are outcome driven, but we all know that we can get caught up in the outcomes and create more stress through what might not happen or what will happen. And so I found methodologies just gives me a way to stay sane, where it feels like you're in control and you have, some logical steps that you can take to try to improve the outcomes you get. Is that how you look at that as well, in terms of it's something that helps you reduce the stress in your profession?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's like self-inflicted wounds that without question, if you're shooting yourself in the foot on a daily basis, there's this old saying that failure is not a single cataclysmic event. It is an error of judgment repeated daily. So to me, right actions, right behaviors, right processes, consistency, following best practices, it's all about probability. You're minimizing your chance of failure. You're increasing your probability of success. But you as a human can really only do so much. There's going to be external factors that are also placed upon you that you can learn, like the matrix, to kind of move around and slow down a little bit and examine and then choose how you respond. But there's going to be things that are outside of your control. So I look at it as right behaviors, minimize stress put on yourself, but then also right mental mindsets, choosing how you respond, how you look at the world, and building strong mental foundations help you when the unexpected also happens.
Yeah, and well, I think that I think why Sean and I are really excited to talk to you is obviously because you've already started to peel the onion on this topic of stress in the sales profession. So I have all sorts of questions. I think Sean would too, about what you guys have learned there. But I think as a starting point, why do you think there is a stigma as it relates to talking about mental health and sales?
Well, let's separate that.
Sure.
There's a stigma about talking about mental health, period, in any profession, in any life. People have no problem saying, I'm fat, I need to go to the gym, and like almost bragging about how much weight they lost and like, how fat they are and how lazy they are and how much they need to go to the gym to fix that. Like when it comes to that side of our health, all day, every day, we love talking about that stuff. Our latest workout routine, our latest this, our latest that. When it comes to the mental aspect, for some reason, it's just as a cultural norm, and it's not in every country, but in the United States, as a cultural norm, mental health is not seen the same way that physical health is seen. I look at it like it's exactly the same. If I want, a strong physique, and as people who can't see me, I don't have one. It's because I don't go to the gym. If I want a strong physique, I need to go to the gym. If I want to be able to respond to the world in healthy ways, I need to work on meditation. I need to work on deep breathing. I need to work on slowing down and thinking before I respond. I need to create healthy habits before I even get to the point of things building up where, negative outcomes then start happening or burnout and stress start happening. So it's kind of the same thing. We just don't talk about it. So I think cultural norm, without question, that's one side. The other side of it is sales is still a highly male-dominated profession, and it's still one of those professions where people like to beat their chest as, be, alpha male, that type of thing. And look, I've done it. I've been there. I'm trying to look at other sides of myself in this equation. But that I think is the other thing. So not only culture, but I feel like just a lot of the types of people that sales attracts naturally propagates that making even harder to dig into.
Well, you see, I think one of the reasons we started this podcast is, you started to see more athletes talk about this. And I think that there's a lot of athletes in sales. I think you'll find that as you just mentioned. And there's a lot of performance parallels to the stress that you feel in our profession that I would imagine athletes would feel. Not to say that I'm as important or have the type of stress that someone like Dak Prescott does, but certainly I think that was interesting to start to see that community start to talk about it a bit more. And I think that's what got Sean and us into this. But on your side, how did you and your wife decide to take on the podcast? Like, what got you guys into exploring this topic?
So my wife has her PhD in psychology. So there's some of that, just natural there. I have one of my degrees in psychology. So there's that parallel. I was also going through at the time, like many folks were, where I was leading a team in COVID. It was right at the beginning of COVID. A boss that I had for 4 years, who I absolutely loved, was let go. There was an org change, and I got a new leader over me who didn't know how to handle stress very well. And when the world started going not in the business's favor, he became more so of an abusive asshole. So I then leaned more into my team. I then started working harder. And eventually I got to this stage of burnout where it's like, no matter what I did, I hit a wall. And no matter what I did, the results didn't get greater. And so when I started feeling that way and I started looking at, man, I'm not the only one. The whole world is feeling that way right now because we're all having to do 5 times as much to get the same result. My wife and I just started talking about that. And it was literally Sunday evening. We were having a glass of wine. We were just chatting about the state of the union in the world, like most probably couples were doing around that time. And we said to ourselves, wow, that was a cool conversation. I bet that conversation would help some people. And we were like, yeah, let's just go back and pour another glass of wine and let's start over and let's record this thing. So we recorded it, put it out there, got some good feedback, started talking about different topics. And then it was funny. We actually got tired of talking to each other. We were like, all right, let's just have some guests on. We've talked to each other enough, and started having some good conversations, some guests, and it's kind of evolved from there.
That's interesting because we were in a similar situation of just with COVID and everybody going remote, having some sort of disconnect with your team. right? And as a manager, and understanding where they're at and what pressure they're feeling with the whole situation was kind of what opened my eyes up to having to think more consciously about their well-being in general, not just like the physical well-being, as you said. And we can even argue that your brain is the most important part of your body. So like if you don't take care of it, everything else will fall apart. So it's kind of priority number one when you talk about like wellness overall. It's interesting you start talking about like guests. Like, is there anything from those conversations with the guests that really stands out to you as a learning or a takeaway? Like I know we've talked to other medical experts that have given us techniques and things, but is there anything that really stood out to you in those conversations that would be really important for our audience to hear about?
I think there's a couple threads. One, if you're in sales and feeling stressed, anxious, burnout, tired, overwhelmed, imposter syndrome, fear, all of those things. First and foremost, it's freaking normal. So like anybody listening to this, like don't like, I'm not gonna tell you don't feel bad, because like honor your feelings, but just know that your feelings are indicative of our profession. So it's okay. Second thing is, there are a lot of people out there that have felt those things on varying degrees of extremes, and many that have found really good coping mechanisms. So it's okay, and there is a path. The path does require conscious effort. So like common threads of morning routines. So not waking up, jumping right in the email. Common threads of rhythms and habits, routines as it relates to like when you wake up, do something that makes you happy, that gives you energy, that fills you with gratitude, that puts you in a good mind space. Then as you're diving into the day, think about your energy levels and your own personal habits and rhythms, and structure your day around those things. So like we all have tasks that give us energy, and we all have tasks that suck energy. But are you going to literally do back-to-back on your calendar of tasks that suck energy from you? And then you know what, how you're going to feel at the end of the day, burned out, tired, and like you have no fucking energy. So think about like how you purposely and intentionally structure your days. So you're both taking and giving yourself energy based on certain tasks and rhythms, and you're conscious of that. So morning routines, conscious of how you balance your calendar, conscious of when you choose to start and stop. There is a stop. You have to stop your day at a reasonable time. And then what you do in your after hours to bring happiness and joy back into your life. Things like, meditation, gratitude journals, when things are, if you look at a normal distribution curve and you're, kind of baseline in the center most of the time, when you start shifting 1 to 2 degrees outside of that baseline, maybe really starting to think about what needs to change, making conscious changes, seeking professional help, talking to, maybe a therapist or somebody like that, when you start getting to far on one side. Like those are all things that, people are looking at that for kind of a path forward that are common threads.
That's great. And I noticed like one of your episodes was focusing on like 2 of the biggest causes of stress in the profession. One was missing plan, and the other was micromanagement. Sean and I have been exploring, the role of the company, the role of the managers, the role of the leaders. And so I wanted to dig into the micromanagement part of this. Like I noticed that you called out micromanagement as one of the top stressors for folks in the profession. And Sean and I have been exploring the role of managers and leaders and how they can help create, a better, healthy selling environment. Maybe walk us through your learnings or takeaways on, what mistakes are managers making that are making it harder for sellers, and then, what things you see that managers, best practices, things they're doing that are helping their reps, manage the stress of the profession.
Yeah, man. And let me just start off by saying, for any leaders listening, people don't leave companies, they leave leaders. So really, really think about that. You have such an amazing responsibility on your people's health, wealth, success, happiness, that you need to take a hard look at what you're doing and how you're making your team feel. And if you're noticing turnover higher than standard in the business, if you're noticing your reps just frankly not happy at work, like you own some of that. You really need to look at it. So anyways, what the whole thing about micromanagement, what's really interesting about micromanagement, all micromanagement is a misalignment between what someone needs and what you give them. That's all it is. So people say micromanagement and they think, oh, it just means you're the boss is, breathing down your neck on everything. Well, you know what? When someone's brand new at a task, that actually may be helpful. So it is a misalignment. And here's how you look at that. There's a shout out to Ken Blanchard. He teaches this methodology called situational leadership. So what situational leadership is looking at, not the person. It's not about the person. It's about the task. Because people have different levels of competency based on different tasks. So when you ask your rep to do a task, you need to look and say, where are they at in a 4-quadrant box on the task? Are they novice, completely brand new? Are they learning to be good, but kind of not there yet? Are they good, or are they an expert? And if someone is a complete novice, you showing up as someone that gives it very prescriptive. Like imagine you've never cooked a meal before. You're going to want the recipe. You're going to want someone to kind of walk you through that a little bit. You're going to watch a little bit of a video. That's not micromanagement. Now, if you did that exact same behavior to someone who's an expert, like a professional chef, and you're like, hey, bud, watch this YouTube video about cooking this thing you've been cooking for 50 years, you're like, you'd feel like you were being micromanaged. So it's not about the behavior. It's about that behavior aligned to where someone is. So the key there is look at someone where someone is on the task. If they're novice, high direction, high support, you tell them what to do. And if there's someone that's kind of learning to be good, you take a little bit more of a coaching stance. You ask for their feedback, ask their plan. You still give them high direction, but you're just involving them in the decision process. Someone's good. It's more of a coaching, like, hey, what's your plan? Let's work on it together. Let's tweak it. If someone's an expert, it's like, hey, can you just go do this thing? And this is the outcome I'm looking for. And let me know when it's done and we'll talk about it. Like that's how you lead. The problem is so many leaders have one style, one approach, or they don't look and they don't think. They just treat everybody the same for all the fucking tasks you're asking them to do. That's where micromanagement comes in, because nobody likes being misaligned on those types of things. People like being treated at the right level of competency on the thing you're asking them to do. And when you're off of that, that's where they're feeling either on an island or micromanaged or some sort of negative thought.
Yeah, and I've learned or observed there's like a bucket I'd call like lazy management techniques, which is like measuring the amount of hours the person's in the office is one example. Another example is managers who just go into their meetings and tell their reps to sell more. Like just sell more. And there is no like diagnosis, there is no coaching. That stuff just drives me crazy. I think that what I've learned is you really need to focus on, the diagnosis part, which is the why behind what might be going on, whether it be performance or some issue or challenge. And sometimes it might be stress or something that's going on in their personal life. Sometimes it may be that they don't know how to do something. But just telling people to do more, I don't think really gets to that. And I don't know if you've had any observations there on as it relates to management, what are some more sophisticated ways that people can think about how they're managing their teams beyond some of those lazy techniques that I talked about?
Yeah. So, study situational leadership. That's question one. The other thing is, and you see this a lot with either new leaders or leaders that just have never learned. And it's typical because most of the time at some point the system is going to reject you. And you're just never going to get above the position you're in, and you're going to constantly churn and burn in organizations, and people are going to hate you. So at some point, you start looking at yourself, most people, and say, I need to get better. So you normally see this with first line leaders. And the recommendation I have is those first time leaders, they were normally good at sales. They were great at sales. That's why they got promoted into leadership. And they were great at sales because they mastered the fundamentals of selling. They did really good discovery. They could align the problem and the solution with the client. They could do really good client, service and make sure that people were taken care of and shepherded through the buying journey properly. They asked the right questions. They presented the right solutions and ultimately could get business done. So you think about all those different selling motions. Then you're like, all right, you're clearly a great seller. So just go build a team just like you and we'll just promote you. and just, a bunch of mini-me's. And then that leader shows up and is like, all right, hey, new team, I'm freaking awesome. They just promoted me. Go do all the things that I did. And it's like, well, I'm not you. So first thing that leaders need to do, if you're looking for like the number one skill, press the reset button. Leadership and sales are completely two distinct disciplines. Everything you did to learn to master sales, you now need to do to master leadership. And the best thing you can do is now realize that your salespeople are your client. Your salespeople don't work for you. You work for them. So if you show up and you do good discovery with your salespeople and understand what they need and what their goals are, and then align the right solution to them, like, oh my God, you're going to fucking be successful. It's the same skill, just applied inwardly to your team versus, someone you're selling. Like, figure that out and you will do really good.
Yeah, we've always debated like the difference between what's appropriate when you have a high performer and actually promoting them to leadership, because we've talked about that as well, that a lot of them, for lack of a better example, because this is not all of them, of course, there's plenty of track records of people being high performing ICs and then moving into leadership successfully, but a lot of them don't have that ability to make that switch. That it's not about yourself any longer, but it's about your team. Like you said, you're serving them. If I can't help them get better, if I can't get the best out of my team, then I'm failing. And we've talked about that many times, where we see people that are really good in sales and that just stink as leaders, and they don't have that natural like coaching ability. And so you think, okay, well, like you said, they learned how to be good at sales. They can learn how to be a good leader. But if they don't have that understanding that not everybody is the same, everybody is an individual contributor, right? And that individual I try to emphasize, because there's so many individualities about it, from their personality, from what motivates them, from what dejects them. Like, you have to recognize those things so that you can then cater your coaching to their style. So, I mean, I have a background in sales enablement as well at Telesign. When we were first, we got our Series B and we were like ramping up the global team. I moved into that role. Matt, at the same time, moved out to Europe and took over building up the whole international organization. And so in parallel, he and I worked in concert to build this onboarding program. And that was like the biggest thing that I think made it successful for us, was understanding that everybody's different. We can't just have this like big program where everyone just kind of goes in and watches a video or sits in one course and then that's, you got your training, now go sell. Like, it doesn't work like that. There's all these follow-up, smaller group, individual one-on-one type engagements that have to be in place to pull out those unique instances so that we can find the levers that we need to pull harder this way and find the other levels we need to push that way, right? And we just manipulate on each person to get the most output we can. If you're interested in educational videos to better yourself, we highly recommend the Great Courses Plus. The Great Courses Plus is a subscription video on-demand learning service that gets you unlimited, uninterrupted access to a world of learning anytime and anywhere you want it. With courses on thousands of topics, you're sure to find something that will ignite your curiosity and invigorate your passion for learning. So head on over to the2salesguys.com/GCP.
So I guess another thing we could talk a little bit about is the culture in companies and how sales can sometimes be treated in organizations. A lot of times sales is held, because our business is so measurable, we're typically held very accountable, which we should. And I think we all know that's why we take it and all the pluses and upsides of being in sales. But you tend to start to see, or I've found in other companies, that other parts of the organization sometimes don't have that same level of accountability and scrutiny into their organizations. And,
absolutely,
there's a lot of friction with sales. Like I saw at Telesign when we grew, like the friction points in the business, there was friction with sales and finance, friction with sales and marketing, friction with sales and CS, and it's tough, especially for a sales leader. And, nowadays, I think, like, what do they say? Like, it's like 17 months is like the average tenure for a sales leader these days. And so, like, yeah, it's terrible, right? And so, like, I think that companies need to evolve how they create great sales cultures. And that's not just in the sales organization, but also the engagements they have across the business and the empowerment and relationships with the executives. What's your take on that in terms of, like, how do companies evolve and create better sales friendly cultures and reduce, some of those frictions that exist inside of sales with all the other parts of the organization?
I think I'm going to piss a lot of people off with this answer. That's sales responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's honestly what I think. I think all these other folks have processes and rules to follow, just like we have processes and rules to follow. What ends up happening, though, is we don't like it. So what happens when a salesperson doesn't like something? We go fucking try and change it. So you're thinking inside the organization, instead of sales trying to seek to understand why legal has their process, why marketing has their process, why something's done a certain way, they just cry. They're like, no, I'm trying to get my deal done. My deal generates revenue for our business. My deal pays your salary. So F you and your process. You need to do what I need right now. In fact, I wanted it 3 hours ago. Why isn't that done yet? And then, you know what? You do that once, and every single person in that business unit freaking starts hating sales. And then that just happens over and over again. So
over and over. Over and over.
So you start looking at organizations that don't have sales-friendly cultures, and I start challenging it. Well, how bad has sales treated that organization? Because there's probably a reason for that. I'm sure all those people didn't set out to say, screw revenue. We don't want new business. Like, I'm sure that wasn't a conversation that happened. It's, oh man, I've got to talk to this sales guy again. And he's going to freaking want this and this. And he's going to want it in an hour, and it's not going to follow our process. And I'm going to have to, try and get it done. Like, so that's what happens. So I'm a big fan of sales friendly cultures. But sales owns it just as much as everybody else.
That's fair.
And we can't control anybody else. So how about we start with ourselves?
Yeah.
Next time you go have a conversation with someone, you ask them for something, how about you, see how their kids are doing? How about you see how, like, work's going? How about you figure out how much they have on their plate? How about you understand why the process exists and the steps and try and get where they're coming from? And then see maybe if you can meet in the middle or set better expectations with your client or for yourself and try and, like, be a good partner, like, start there.
Yeah.
And I'm a sales guy saying that.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I think, tension obviously by design is a good thing in a business, right? Because it creates balance for wherever that tension point exists. And I think that's great. But I do love, like, taking more accountability. I remember at Telesign, Sean, when we were having a lot of friction with our client services organization. So what we did is we surprised them with a client services day, and the whole sales team, we bought shirts that said, I love CS, and then literally wrote, like, all of us collected feedback on the things we loved about the CS reps and got them into a meeting room and presented to them what we loved about each of the individuals on the CS team. And the faces on the individuals, after all the friction and issues, et cetera, it just made things a lot lighter. And so I think that's a good example of, like, accountability and being the first one to take that first step, right?
Yeah. Oh, you actually like me? I thought you hated me.
Yeah. Well, that's where I go, where I think most of it is just perception based. To your point, it's about a bad interaction they've had in the past. And so, I mean, another example that we had when we had that friction was what we noticed salespeople doing when they needed something from another department was they just sent over, like, hey, I've got this client, they need their account set up. Please set that up for me. And it's like, you don't work for sales. Like, that's not your job. You don't work for us. So why am I just telling you, go do this? Instead, frame it up in a way that's like, hey, listen, our customer just closed. Here's who they are. This is what they're doing. And we need an account set up. You open it up more friendly, and just changing that paragraph that you're right, which takes 10 seconds to think about, diffused all of that those friction points?
As a new leader, I'm ramping up in a business right now. Every single conversation I'm having, how do we best work together? Where has that broken down in the past? What's working? What's not? What do you need from me? Like, it's those questions, because we need to seek to understand, like, what does good look like, but where's their bad blood, and how do we figure that out together and get past it? Like, it is a relationship. That's what you do in relationships. You have a fight with somebody, you come back to the table and try and make peace. I don't know if that always happens on the other side. Like, we as a sales organization has a fight with finance, and then we just expect everything's cool the next day when we go ask them for a discount. Like, you got to make peace at some point. So I love that you guys did that, because that was the olive branch. You made peace.
Yeah.
So
little things. It's amazing what little things can do in terms of impact. And I love your thoughts on taking accountability. I think that's good. I don't think people should hate that response. And I think sales is an accountable part of the organization, as I mentioned, and the more we can take accountability to create great partnerships, the better. We're growing a ton. We went on my current company. We went from 30 people to 150 people in about a year's time. And so we've done a lot of reorganization and org structure exercises. And you have to draw lines in the company, right? Like, there's arguments about, where does the BDR team report? Is that into sales or marketing? Where does CS report? Is that their own organization, or does it report into sales? And it doesn't really matter, because at some point you're going to have to trust another department in the organization that's not in sales. And there's going to have to be a trust that they're incentivized and going to do a great job to help you hit your number. And so trust becomes really important part of that. I think that's in the responsibility of the executive team that hold the organizational departments inside the company. I'm a huge fan of the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Have you guys read that book by Patrick Lencioni? It's a really good book. He writes books in the style of their fables. So it's a business book, but it's actually a story that he writes about a fictional company. And one of the 5 dysfunctions is a lack of trust. And that lack of trust can be a real big problem that exists at the executive team. And that's, I think, where you see friction start to roll downhill in other parts of the organization. If you don't have trust with the CRO and the head of client services, or trust with the marketing team and the sales leader. And so I think back to your point, it's something we can take accountability for as sales leaders. But I do think that that's something that the CEO should also be working on, which is, how does he build trust across the organization?
Yeah, and look, everyone should be doing their job, and everyone should hit the expectations of their role without question. I'm not trying to let anyone else off the hook. All I'm saying is, like, our reward is so much higher that our accountability needs to be in line with the reward to some extent, more so. Just
all right. Well, David, let's geek out for a little bit before we close out and I crack my own beer and you get onto your Saturday afternoon. Where's all this going? I guess we could talk a little bit about, like, mental health and wellness, because what's interesting is I'm hearing the same things over and over. It's meditation. It's the gratitude journal. I'd love to hear your take first on that. And then we can talk more broadly and have some fun thought about, like, where sales is going. But, where do you see wellness and health and mental health going in the next 5-10 years? And do you think, like, that we're going to evolve? Are there going to be things that we don't know today or don't do today that we will be doing as it relates to the profession of sales and stress?
Yeah, what I'm really hopeful for is that, and I feel like COVID has accelerated this, and I see more and more people on LinkedIn and influencers talking about it. I think we are shining a bigger light on the importance of that equation, and I'm hoping that I don't think that. There may be hope, but I don't know if there is for the current generation of sales leaders. But I think for the ones coming up, I feel like, folks like myself that will be in much more senior leader roles, and the people that are coming up behind me, I feel like they see this now, and they see the importance of this now. So I feel like as the generational flips and the age, we start to see that natural transition. I think we're going to see just the natural evolution of sales. There's a lot to it, but also making sure the organizations are taking in the mental side. They're caring about their employees more. Leaders are asking how people are feeling. Leaders are caring about how they talk to and empower and have conversations with their teams. Like, I think that will just naturally change. So I'm really hopeful for that, because I'm a true believer that, there's two sides of a coin. There's all your knowledge and experience and, call it skills and capabilities. And then there's the mental health, the ability to then tap in and leverage all of those things. And if you're diminished in some capacity on how you're feeling, it's going to be much harder to tap into all that other stuff, because you're not going to want to or have the capability to. So I think.
Yeah, certainly. I think it'll be better for everyone. And I think we'll start to see that this is going to impact results, No doubt. I think you're just going to see higher employee retention, which is obviously a metric people are paying attention to now. But hopefully I think companies will start to see dollar figures tied to how they treat people and how they take care of their folks. I did, since you're such a thought leader, David, want to geek out a little bit on like the future of sales. I just bought Gong for our organization. I'm so excited. I felt like a kid on when we signed the sales order. I felt like a kid on like Christmas. I just can't wait to deploy Gong. I think it's one of the coolest tools out there, and we should get some credit here, Sean, for obviously mentioning Gong from those guys. But what I've heard, there's technology out there now that, like, because they're obviously doing like call analysis. They're starting to like surface up what the rep should say in a call, like scripts in live calls, which is fucking crazy. And like, I love the automation. I love the AI and all these things that are happening in innovation and sales, all the tools and technologies. But like, it is a little scary to start to think about like, where does sales go? And like, how will it evolve and change? So I don't know, man, like, what are your thoughts on like the human element of sales, tools and technology, where it's going, the good things, the bad things, really just anything you want to share and geek out with me on this thing with?
Yeah. So I feel like, okay, the buyer journey is getting more sophisticated. Buyers have access to more data, more stats, more reports, all that stuff. So the buyer is way more sophisticated than they ever have been. So selling is looking to match that, while eke every potential area of productivity training that they can out of their folks. So those are two interesting things happening. Future of sales for me is a lot around this concept of guided selling. It is taking the guesswork out of sales and using artificial intelligence to tell reps what they should do next. So you're seeing this with, let's just start top of the funnel. You're seeing this with companies like 6 Sense that are looking at buyer intent. They're telling marketing organizations spend money here and telling sales organizations call these people. Then you've got outreach. That's kind of the next step of the funnel. You've got an outreach that's saying buyer intent says this. Let's trigger automation to make sure we're getting to them as fast as possible, while giving reps, guided actions on here's what you say next, make this call, then do this thing. So it's guided top funnel actions. Then you've got things like 6 Sense that are applying in the deal where it's like, all right, you're about to have this conversation with a person, read this article. You're just finished your first conversation, send them this case study. You just, did a demo with them, make sure you include these slides and make sure you use this follow-up. So it's guided selling and all the storytelling and the content. And then to your point, companies like Wingman, Outreach, Gong is doing this, where like in Zoom and different types of calls, they're called battle cards. Like someone says something like, hey, who do you integrate with? Integrations, here you go, rep, read that screen. All of that type of stuff. So all of this to me falls into, and then shit, man, we've got like close plan and we've got all these things for mutual action plans. And there's so much. To me, it's all going to that guided selling. It's how do we accelerate rep activity while telling somebody exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it, with the thought process of let's increase the probability of winning that deal and let's accelerate the cycle as much as we can.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I mean, not to do like the old guy thing, but like one of my first sales jobs was like in a boiler room. I was selling office supplies over the phone, and my leads would be dropped onto my desk in a stack of papers that had a name and like an address, and that was it. And then you just pick up the phone and call, and and then you had like a disposition sheet that you marked like who answered, and it's all done manually. And it's crazy to think about like all the weapons that we have at our disposal now. It's nuts, but I do think that like we have to be cautious, like, because it's also becoming more complicated. It's becoming more complicated for a seller to navigate through all these tools. And I see a lot of companies where they buy technologies, but they haven't really nailed like the design of those things. And yeah, exactly. Right. And so I feel like that's like a new role that could potentially be created in sales. Like I think they're doing that in like CX organizations and a lot of like the enterprise space, and like who's designing the customer experience or the buyer experience from end to end, and how do they use tools to orchestrate that experience and
sales orchestration.
Yeah, something like that. Someone that's looking like revenue orchestration, or it's like kind of like that revenue ops role that's been created a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say revenue ops. You have sales enablement, sales operations, marketing operations, but they're all going to start falling into revenue operations. So that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, thanks for letting me segue into that topic. It's fun. It's fun to think about. It's fun to think about where we've come. Anything else, David, you want to add, man, before we close out, like about anything we talked about today?
And I'll just double click on that. I mean, it is a really cool time to be a seller. I mean, if you really think about it, we went from phone books and Excel spreadsheets to Salesforce and phones and email, and then nothing for a really long time. And now, like, fast forward, you're kind of getting the first iterations of these things. So like Seismic is 10 years old, but that's really young for a startup. They're just starting to get to maturity. Outreach is like 6 years old. Gong is like 6 years old. So like you guys know this, it takes a while for tech to start kind of maturing and like actually becoming super useful. So we're starting to see like that now. Now it's like, all right, well, we got all these awesome shiny toys and tools. How do we get them all to work together? And then once we get all those things to work together, it's like, this is almost like the first iteration. Like all of those companies that I just mentioned, like if you look at a maturity curve, you've got like, very young, and you got some like first movers, early adopters, and then you start going up the curve. Like all of those are still like on the far left side of the curve. So it's going to be really cool, man. Once all these things start iterating and they start evolving and everything starts getting tied together, like sales teams are just going to have, like, to me, they're just going to have to become really, really, really good at having business conversations.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's what people should be mastering. Product knowledge is going to be served to you. Content and messaging, served to you. When to follow up, how to follow up, done likely for you. Like, what you need to be really focused on, if I'm teaching a sales team right now, having really, really, really good business conversations.
Yeah.
What is the problem that organizations are trying to solve? Why are they trying to solve it? Why now? What's the business impact? What's the business case? Becoming business people and aligning to the buyer journey really close. I mean, like, you understand why they're talking to you as well as they do, and you're really aligning really well with them. You're not pitching product. You're having business conversations around the world of what's possible, and then you're starting to align your solution to it. But you're starting with, it doesn't matter what the solution is. Let me just have a conversation you really understand.
Yeah.
That's where business get really good.
Yeah.
Or really good from my perspective.
This may not be relevant to the podcast episode specifically, but I wanted to ask about Salesforce specifically, because I'm seeing something happening. There's a couple things I've observed. One, I'm seeing more people ask me for alternatives to Salesforce than I've ever seen before. Two, tools are coming up. Like we just implemented a tool called Scratchpad. Great one, that makes it easier for you to update your pipeline without going into Salesforce. I just bought Gong, and through the demo, like that's where I'll live now for my pipeline reviews, which means that you're buying these tools that are getting you out of Salesforce. They're still relying on Salesforce as the underlying thing, but like they're a little bit of a dinosaur, man. Like they've been around forever. Like Lightning, like I actually kind of preferred Classic more than Lightning. Like they tried to like do sort of like a mobile and social experiment, and it's fine, but like it's tough because they've been around for so long. And it's no disrespect to Salesforce, because we just talked to a person from there, and they are doing some great things in terms of innovation. But I just feel like that market is changing, and what a CRM is changing. And I don't know, like, what's your guys' take? I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on like where will Salesforce always be the thing? Do you see like other people coming in and eating away at their market, or like will Salesforce evolve to become something different than what we kind of view it as today?
Salesforce is the iPhone. That's what it's becoming. So what Salesforce has done better than anybody else, they have I think there is an 87 or 90% market share. They're everywhere. Like Dynamics has like 3%, and I think HubSpot's like 1%. I mean, it's crazy. So what they've done a masterful job at is their partner ecosystem. They have done a really nice job of making it so anybody that wants to connect to Salesforce can. Dynamics really struggles at connections. Not everyone builds stuff for Dynamics. No. HubSpot is terrible for connection. They just build it themselves. I love HubSpot. Yeah. I like HubSpot people. Yeah. Trust me, it's a great tool. I think they're clients, so I'm sorry, they're not terrible. But they have their own CRM. They have their own sales engagement. They have their own marketing platform. Like they're trying to build an all-in-one ecosystem, which is great for companies that want that. What I like that Salesforce has done is they've created this hub and spoke model where Salesforce is the hub. So what I think is they're going to get more sophisticated with that. So where Salesforce will be, the hardware, the hard phone, they're going to make it easier for everyone to connect and plug in and seamlessly integrate and allow that to all orchestrate and connect off of. So do I see them going away? No, because I think they've done too good of a job of that and they have too much market share. Could someone eventually come out with something better and eat into them? Yeah. But as long as all of these third parties, Gong, Chorus, Outreach, SalesLog, like all the big names in tech, they're all building their integrations for or with Salesforce. And until that changes, like all your best of breed third party are using Salesforce as the hub. Until that piece changes, you're not going to have anything else change, because that's what everyone's going to be buying to connect to. So I think they're around for a while. I just think they're going to become less of the place everybody works and more of the place that everyone.
You could argue they're kind of like a CDP at that point, because they're just they're the underlying data source for all these other tools that sit on top. But yeah, Sean, what do you think, man?
No, I think your analogy of the iPhone was perfect, because when the iPhone first came out, a lot of people didn't understand like what the big deal was with just a new phone. There was already a million phones out there. But your point is that it's just this underlying platform that now all these applications and services have built upon it that interconnect with each other, that it's so ingrained in there that fast forward to today with the iPhone, like iPhones aren't going anywhere. Like everyone loves the iPhone because everything is built on it and released on it and integrated through it. So it's just deeply embedded. And yeah, I mean, for Salesforce's aspect, I guess that's where you get the concern that they're going to become this obsolete, just like technology, if you look at it from a technology standpoint. But that's why they've also invested so heavily through acquisitions to make all these other applications so sticky, or partnerships, like you said, that now it's so embedded. Like I can't see us not using Salesforce. It would just, yes, there's other platforms that have integrations with the third-party tools we use, but that path to get there is just much harder than it is on Salesforce. I don't think it's going anywhere. And
well, for enterprises too, like I operate in a world that's mostly like Series A, seed, pre-seed, Series A, Series B companies. And that's where I see the most change in points of views for those. I mean, the largest enterprises in the world like run their business on Salesforce, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But I do see like SMBs, like it's a pain in the ass for them to deploy Salesforce. It's expensive. You need a lot of expertise. And like I see companies, that's why I see companies asking for alternatives, because they don't want to have a consultant. They don't want to have to pay the fees. And I know Salesforce has like an SMB offering now, like they have like a light version, I think, or something. But that's where I've seen, I guess, the most changes in perspectives as it relates to Salesforce.
Yeah, I think something could displace Salesforce if they built another iPhone. If they built a platform that really, because the trouble with all these third parties is that if no one company can be great at everything. So if you try to do more than one thing or a couple things, you just suck at everything or you're mediocre at everything. So you need to still find that hub and spoke where, you know, maybe something lives here, but then all of these other third parties can connect to it. If someone was to create a better center point with all these third parties, I think Salesforce could get a real run for their money right now. Because not everyone needs to live in Salesforce anymore. They're living, to your point, for call analysis and Gong, for pipeline and outreach, for, you know, in mid deal cycle and Seismic, and for forecasting and Clary. Like, you know, all the marketing is living in 6 Sense and you know, marketing orchestration. Like, no one has to live in Salesforce. People are like, shit, I've got to go to Salesforce and update this, so it flows to all these other places. Like that's why people are going to Salesforce. So if somebody could figure out these, they'd have something.
Yeah. Well, I think the last thing I'll mention, I thought would like be a neat thing to think about for the future, and this ties back to the stress thing. We have a gaming division of our business, and we went and talked to this company. They work with professional esports teams. And what they do is they tie performance data with health data, because professional gamers typically don't have a great health regimen, you know, and they see a lot of burnout. Like a lot of professionals retire at like 24 because they've been sitting behind a computer screen their whole lives, not exercising, not sleeping, not eating healthy. And so they were thinking about tying or marrying those two data sets of like health data with performance data to see the impact. Be interesting to see if a company like Gong starts to tie some of that stuff in to where they're like, hey, you know, this rep is showing signs of burnout. Like they probably shouldn't be handling calls right now, or we may need to pull back the number of things that they're doing, or whatever that might be. It'd be interesting to see if we ever get to that point, if that's kind of on the horizon, something like that.
I love that, man. Somehow tie the Apple iWatch health data to you know, some sort of app within the sales ecosystem. Yeah,
like heart rate data. Like, you know, in Gong, like you see like the call left to right, like speaking time, and then you got like the rep's heart rate, and like where did their heart rate spike? It was like when they had to discuss pricing, their heart rate shot through the roof.
Exactly.
Right after the call, you need pricing training.
And you need to go meditate for 10 minutes because you're stressed out.
I would tell you to breathe, then it serves your pricing training.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah.
It'd be cool. Maybe
I got a hammer last night. They didn't sleep, and you know their heart rate's fluctuating.
Right.
You have a conversation.
Sales kickoff happened, and all of a sudden, all of our reps like health data is in the toilet. Why would that be?
Right. I love that. That's interesting.
Good business idea. We should work on that, man. Or someone can steal it from us here, and then we can hopefully get credit for it.
Peace out, and let's work on that. Yeah. That's a cool.
I think Gong's those call platforms where they have the performance data. They're in a good position to do that. I can't imagine that like someone's not thinking about that over there at some point. You know,
the biggest challenge we run into is HIPAA with people approving their health data to be sent to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just be part of the problem. You have to accept.
Maybe that's where you work with Apple, like you said, with the iWatch measuring it. Maybe there's a way to not share the actual raw, like what's going on with your health, but the analysis of it within the iWatch, right? And that just feeding that result into Gong with some like timestamps and like a result recommendation of like the analysis itself. And that way it's more high level, like hey, like at this point in the call, there was something or whatever, or just more over time, it's generically like they might be in a stressful situation right now, like physically or mentally. And so it's just at a heightened state or whatever the category they would be placed into. And that just is an alert for like a sales manager. And it's more high level to start with until we see results. And then it can get more into the details.
You build it for the reps themselves. It's not an enterprise solution. It's a rep solution, something they go like sign up for themselves because they want to make themselves better, and marry their performance data with their health data, something like that.
Well, it's the same concept we were talking earlier, where there's not a stigma around going to the gym. Like they'll tell you haven't walked yet today. Get your ass up and go for a run. Like it'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, David. I mean, this was a blast, man. I really appreciate you spending a Saturday afternoon geeking out on this stuff and for what you and your wife are doing. I think you guys are doing kind of the same thing we're trying to do, which is just create more conversation around this stuff. And I think it is getting better, and I can't wait to see how it evolves. But thanks again, man, for doing this.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on. Enjoy the beach. Sean, have a good rest of your weekend, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks, guys.
If you made it this far through the episode, you're awesome. We could really use your help though. If you could go ahead and rate our episode 5 stars, we would really appreciate that. We want to get as many ratings as possible on all the platforms where podcasts are available. Now in 2 weeks, on May 12th, we have our next incredible episode with Ian Koniak. Ian is the top salesperson at Salesforce.com. He's been a high performer for 8 years there, outperforming his target year over year. And he has an incredible story about his struggles and what it took for him to recenter himself and get back on the path to success. So once again, that episode's coming out May 12th. That's 2 weeks from today. We thank you so much for listening. Keep following the show on all Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we love you guys. Have a good one.